Let me make the general statement just to start off, and this will be the only infomercial I'll make. I wrote a book about, my first book was written about in 1997. It was based on my 20 years as a recruiter, and it was geared to people in corporations, managers and recruiters, and it was called Hire With Your Head. A couple months ago, I revised it, and it came out in 3 editions, was done by Wiley, made number 3 on all-time nonfiction books, so it was pretty cool when it came out, Hire With Your Head. But I always felt that another book should be there that was really focused on job seekers as well. So I wrote a book which was hard to do. It was called The Essential Guide for Hiring and Getting Hired. No obligation to get it because I write a lot of articles and stuff about it. There's the URL if you want to just take a look at it, or the table of contents. But the point of that book was to not only to focus on 3 groups: recruiters, hiring managers, and job seekers. The idea was to tell hiring managers, recruiters what to do, and to tell job seekers what they should do if the manager and your recruiter are doing it right. But quite frankly, I know that 90% of recruiters and managers don't do it right, so it was also to allow job seekers, how do you control the process? So that's where I think, and it was not an easy book to write, trying to keep all 3 perspectives together. So it was a bit challenging. It was harder than I thought. Nonetheless, there are managers that do it right, and recruiters that do it right, and interviewers that do it right, and there's a lot of them that don't. And you as a job seeker, if you're serious about it, you got to figure out, hey, you got to be such a good at interviewing that you're not thinking about answering the questions. You're thinking about, okay, what's going on here, and am I being assessed properly? So it's to the point of every book says how to be a great interviewer. I'll tell you, that's really not it. You got to be so good that you know what's really going on. But to get in the interview, you got to be real good at networking, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So let me just kind of start by saying what the market for jobs really is, so you know it. And I've written posts on this on LinkedIn, but just to give you a real sense of it, and that'll set the stage. There really are two job markets, excuse me. One job is the hidden market, which I'm showing on the left on this chart. The other, the public market's on the right. But it really starts by how jobs are filled. And if you've been a manager, you guys have been in companies, so you all know that. I mean, some of you don't if you're really young, but hey, a manager's sitting there and says, oh, I got to hire somebody. Or I'm getting too much work to do, I got to get a rec approved. And they're thinking, well, Mary over here in Department B, she could be it. Or she called, hey, I need somebody to do this job over here. Do you know anybody? And it's all part of the internal mobility program in companies. We did a survey, I think it's actually higher than this, but we did a survey of people who found their last jobs, about 1,000 or 1,500. I did a couple months ago. 10% got their job because it was internal move or promotion. If they don't know nobody internally, they start looking for people they know. Hey, John, I'm looking for this person. I know we got the employee referral program, but you work over at this company. Is there anybody good there? Or I know, hey, I just worked with this person, Kathy Smith. I wonder if she's available. So a lot of this internal networking, and a manager just thinking about what the job is, which is very interesting. They haven't officially done the rec yet. Sometimes, and because it's a hidden market, when they promote someone, it's always about performance and potential. Hey, Kathy doesn't have all the skills, but she's so sharp, she can handle it. Let's give her the job. And maybe we won't give her the full job. Instead of giving her 8 people, we'll break it up a little bit. I'll give Bill the supervisory role, and I'll make Kathy have the supervisor role, and we'll make the job a little bit different. A lot of different flexibility on the left in the hidden market. But once they publicize the job on the job board, things change. You got all this legal stuff that people got to take into account. And recruiters now are scrambling. Okay, let me post a job. Let me do a resume search. They search for your resume and all this stuff. And that's about half the market is hidden and half the job market is public. And that's why I make the statement is don't spend all your time applying to a job because it's a 1% probability. We had a class this morning, a bunch of recruiters. They basically said we get 300 to 500 responses for everyone. I talked to 5 or 10. And this is recruiters on a class this morning. They said, and I know this is to be true because we train recruiters around the world, is when they look at your LinkedIn profile or resume, they spend 10 seconds looking at it. 10 seconds. That's not a lot of time, guys. I mean, so if you don't stand out in 10 seconds, you don't have a chance. That's why it is a 1 in 100. It's a lottery. So I say don't apply to jobs. But if you're going to, so here's my 20-20-60 job hunting plan. Yeah, look for jobs on the open market, but don't apply. Figure out how can I network myself to get through the back doors. That's 20% should be there, but not hitting the apply button because that's a lottery number, unless you're a perfect fit, and even then it's random. 20%, because there are a lot of people looking for your resume, that's actually a little bit different kind of process. So having a great resume, has time to look at it, make sure it zings, make sure it's positioned properly where it's people look. Obviously, we can't do that today, but you got to get your resume out there in the marketplace where people are going to find it, and when they find it, they give them 10 seconds. Wow, I want to talk to this person. But 60% should really be on networking. To me, and networking is hard work, but it's not haphazard work, which people just call people up, hey, you know this. There is a process to networking. So my job hunting plan is a 20-20-60 plan. I'm going to give you some tips on the 60, and I'll answer your questions on the 60 plan today. And I want to kind of talk about the value of networking. And it really goes back to the hidden in the public job market. When you apply for a job on the public market, it's very rigid. You have to have the skills listed. They publicize it there. They got to do reporting there. It becomes a mixing and matching game, which is very hard to win. And it's so frustrating. And I see your emails coming back, and the comments you write in my posts. Oh, it's frustrating. It's frustrating. It's frustrating. It's not because of you. You almost can't take it personally. It's because it's this automatic system, and there's laws we've got here that make it very inflexible. In the public in the hidden market, they don't have a job record written. It's just kind of, I think I can use this. There's a lot more flexibility. So I tend to like to be in the hidden market if I was a candidate. So think about this, and I say, if you get a strong endorsement from a highly respected person, you don't have to have any background. I'll see you. I've gotten so many responses. I mean, somebody, hey Lou, this is my great person. I'll talk to that person. Why would I want to talk to a great person as a recruiter? But I don't have time to talk to people I can't place. But a great person, I'm going to connect with. I'm going to work with that person sometime in the future, if not the present. That's the ideal. That's the A level. A strong endorsement from a trusted person is not as good, but it's still pretty good. Someone known who gives me a resume, that's okay. It's better than applying, but I'll read that resume. This one I'll give 10 seconds. You apply, you're getting 10 seconds. And when I talk about me, it's me to every recruiter in the world. And literally, JJ, how many recruiters have we trained? And since I've been working with JJ, we've trained recruiters. What would you say, JJ, how many recruiters we've trained in our training in the last 10 years since you've been with the company?
Several thousand.
Yeah, easily. And they all do it that way. They give you 10 seconds. And they don't have a lot of flexibility to deal with. Recruiters are, in some way, they are gatekeepers, and some of them more than others, but once they're in a public market, there's a lot of restrictions. So the idea is you got to get there, you got to get beyond the gatekeeper, you got to get into the more flexible hidden market, and that's where skills and experience aren't as important. And that's just a general idea. To me, that's why 60% is so invaluable. That's the number you got to live with. And so here's the target. Posting a job. Now this is probably pretty hard. I'm going to say if the value of responding to a posting is 1x, it's just some value. What's the likelihood of getting it? Searching on your resume done well is 5 times more powerful. So doing that is still probably 10 times more powerful, but I don't have a real stat for it. But I know it's more powerful. If I look at a resume, I'm looking for resumes, I will read those. You apply, there's less value to applying. I'll give you 10 seconds. A resume I find I'll give 30 seconds to a minute, so it's got more value. Networking, however, is at least 20x, at least 20 times better. Could be 100 times better. A network from a strong endorsement, it's probably 500 times better, but it's certainly 20x or better than a posting. That's why I just say, networking is, and it's not easy, but it's critical. So I want to say, understanding building your network. We'll get into questions. Well, let me just say, any questions? Why don't we take one question right now, JJ? We're at the 15-minute mark. I don't mind answering something.
Oh, yeah, gosh, we have a ton of questions. So we'll start with one. If you've got a target company that you're looking at and you're trying to network with somebody within that company to get a referral, do you suggest just targeting one individual, or do you suggest trying to network with several individuals within that company to strengthen your chances of getting that job?
Okay, so that was actually a forced choice question, meaning you only gave me 2 choices. The question should have been, how do I get into a company that I'm targeting? That's a little bit open-ended. And I know that's a stupid thing for me to say, but why would you put conditions around the question? And a lot of people do that in life. They say, hey, what about this or that? Now, I'm just mentioning that statement, so I'll answer the first part, how do you get into a company? And it's a great question. There's no problem. It's a great question. The way I would do it, I'm actually going to talk a little bit about it, but the way I would do it is if you go on LinkedIn, and I'll actually go on LinkedIn and show you, when you look for a job posting, if I have it, I don't know that I have that one on the screen, so I don't have a lot of time to look. When you go onto LinkedIn, if you have a big enough network, it will actually show you people, it will show you the degrees of connections to a person in that company. So what I always like to do is find someone in the company, hiring manager better, the hiring manager's boss, the director of the VP, versus the recruiter. But you will see the sequence on LinkedIn. I would then want to have someone in that sequence refer me to the hiring manager. And I'm going to go through that, but so I just want to make the general statement is when you find a company and a job you want, which I think is a very important thing to do, the back door is, hey, who knows me? And I look on LinkedIn, and I'll try to get on LinkedIn Live towards the end of this program so I can show you where those actually are, because to me it's invaluable. Now I think you do. I purchased a premium product for LinkedIn, and I think I'm paying $10 or $15, $20 a month. So I might have a little bit more visibility than you do, but we'll kind of go through that. But that's a very fair question. I didn't want to choose it because I think there are multiple answers, and there's probably more answers. Let me go through this, and we'll start getting some other questions as well. And I know JJ's starting to read all the questions. So this kind of ties into it. When you're building your network in the and trying to find people, so you're trying to find certain people are connected to higher level people who actually can get you in the face of a hiring manager or in the face of a executive or a hiring manager's boss. When you get into those positions, particularly if it's in a hidden market, there's a lot more flexibility. And if you get highly recommended, they will actually adjust the job to meet you. They'll make the job a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, give you this, give you that. There's a lot more flexibility, and you actually can get a career move via networking. If you get referred to a recruiter, recruiters, and I'm going to say this twice, and it's a little bit, it might not make perfect sense, but recruiters find people for jobs. They don't find jobs for people. I'll say that again. Recruiters find people for jobs. I'm a recruiter. I've got this job to fill. If you call me and I'm not filling that job, there's nothing I can do with you as a person. I won't even look at your resume. I won't even give you the 6 seconds. It's not because I don't want to, but I, the recruiter in corporate America, have working 20 to 30 assignments at any one time. It's not that they got this extra time. They're always behind the gun. So it's always automatic and mixing and matching. So the question that was just asked is, hey, how do I get in the back door? You got to get the people where the job is a career where you're focused on performance and potential. And that's where nodes come into account. How do I find somebody? So here's the step-by-step process. I'm just going to give you the basic process. And there are two processes. One is the first question. The question was, how do I get into a company? And the second, in my mind, which is not unimportant, but that's phase two. Phase one is, how do I build my network so that when I go into companies, I have a network already there. So I want to kind of start about this way. And this was, I think this was the article I wrote that was actually the catalyst for this webcast. So it kind of talks about it. Find 3 to 5 people who are very close to you, people who can give you a recommendation, who trust your judgment. You have to find people who know well. It could be a professor, it could be a person you work with. It doesn't matter who the person is, and it shouldn't be a family member, but hey, if it is, it is, you know. So it's, but person who is well networked, not even have to be well reasonably networked, but someone who truly trusts you. You've got to meet that person in person. You've got to greet that person, talk to that person over the phone. You're going to take your resume and you're going to give it to the person for 10 seconds, only 10 seconds. And you're going to give the person, hey, I'd like you to review my resume. You got 10 seconds. I want you to circle everything you see in 10 seconds. In 10 seconds, you take it back, seriously, and you look at what's circled. And if it's not what you want circled, redo your resume until in 10 seconds, the stuff that, remember, because I will tell you, you have 10 seconds to get your resume received. Because even when that person sends your resume forward or LinkedIn profile forward, people will give everybody courtesy of 10 seconds. And it's got to say wow in 10 seconds. So it really got to just stand out. So that's just one way to do it. You can even look at your own resume, circle the stuff that's big and bold and stands out, and if it isn't what you want, redo it. There is web-based technology that says the F shape. I can't draw it. I guess I can draw an F. I assume I can. I can put a pen here. Not a great F, but here's an F. This is the way people look at your resume. Any document, you guys do it. They look at the first line and the subtitle. They then look at the bolded prints along the side here. That's what you get in 10 seconds. I would not make your address part of that. I would make your name even smaller, but you might want to have a personal branding statement. I saw one a couple of weeks ago that said Java coach for the whole entire company. Well, to be a Java coach, or it could have been .NET, I don't know what it was, but that's pretty cool. That alone was enough to, hey, I got to look at this person. So what's your own personal brand? Does it make sense? If I look in your LinkedIn profile, does that subtitle in your LinkedIn profile stand out? Tell me something about you that's different. Or is it just some boilerplate or some save the world from hunger or something? The point of, and I don't want to be facetious, well, maybe I do. I tend to be facetious, but how do I clear? Oh, there it is. Oh, it's a erase pen. Okay. So review the resume. What you're going to do during that meeting is, in addition to reviewing the resume, you're going to go into that meeting with 3 or 4 names of people whom you want to connect with in that person's connection. And you're going to ask, would you recommend me to this person? Now, this is where I'm going to go to LinkedIn Recruiter and show you how this is done. Okay, so I'm just, this is where I say I believe everybody has this, but I can't be positive. I have, and I'm not paying a lot for it, but I just said, okay, and the only reason I did this, I found my network. And the first one, let's assume I'm marketing. And I know Daniel extremely well. And he's a person I've worked with very, very closely. He's someone of my 3 to 5 people, I'm going to connect with. And I'm going to show him my resume. But what's interesting with Daniel, he's my connection. I'm going to connect on his connections, and I can look at these. Now, what happens is, rather than me going into Daniel and say, Daniel, who do you know who I can talk to, which I think you should do, what I'm actually going to do is, hey, you know, I'd really, this person at Hansa Media Group, I'd like to meet with Samuel. What do you think? Would you recommend me to Samuel? Would you recommend me to Angela? Would you recommend me? I think I got more names here too, so I can actually go through all of those lists. And I don't think that I'm not positive I actually did the right button here, but the point is, what I want to do, I lost that. Huh? And I think this is a real important point. Oops, important point. If I can get back, that's why I don't like to go live, guys. But that's what it is. I can go. Here's the button I wanted. So I can start looking at this person's connections and find 3 or 4 names of people I think I want to work with. And to me, this is where you got to spend 60% of the time. Hey, let me just take a look. Who else is here on Daniel's things who I can connect with? Oh, Catherine. Yeah, she's pretty cool. I'd like to see that company. So I start looking at these connections, and when I go to the meeting, all of a sudden, it's a different meeting. You're reviewing my resume. You're helping guide me. These are people I trust. And I'm also, hey, if I get my resume upgraded, would you recommend me to these 5 people? You also then say, is there anybody else who you might know who you could set up a meeting with me? And you repeat this. And I got to tell you guys, this is the heart and soul of networking. So now, let me kind of make the statement. Now when you find a company of choice and you decide to go through the back door, you've already built your network up to go through the back door. It's pretty hard to go through the back door if you don't have a network, which was the first question. A very excellent question. Hey, I want to work at XYZ company. I want to work at Google. Well, if you don't have anybody to get you into Google, then you got to make the cold call, which is not inappropriate either. And I'll give you some ideas on that. In fact, okay, let me kind of leave it at that for a second. There was a guy, and I haven't heard the story of this, but it was about 3 or 4 months ago, somebody who connected with me on through that LinkedIn blog posting, LinkedIn influencers. And he said, I just got an MBA. I want to work for a big consumer products company. I don't have anybody well-known who I can connect with. I said, well, look on LinkedIn and find a company you'd like to work with. And he did come up with one that was a telephone or telecommunications company. And I said, and send an email to the vice president. And it was listed right there, or a director of marketing. I said, just send a person an email, but do something different. Send a video of something you've done. In fact, before you do it, even do, you found a job there, and the guy was telling me about the job. He said, one job is to do competitive analysis. He says, why don't you just send a competitive analysis there? Don't, spend a couple of hours, send it to the director of marketing. It might not be exactly the right department head, but you do a competitive analysis of analyzing all the telecommunication companies in your area, and say, hey, you'd like the 10 to 15-minute talk to see if you could be appropriate for that job. The guy got an interview. I didn't hear what happened afterwards, but he called me. He said, Lou, I got the interview. Thanks a lot. So it was kind of an unusual way of backdooring it. He just totally cold. He just did something. I've been the advice I'm giving you, if you're totally cold, be a little bit weird, be a little bit freaky, work for free, do a blog post, say, hey, I just saw your job posting, here's 3 reasons, and do a video, YouTube, here's 3 reasons why I think I could do this. I know you're looking for someone to design some circuit to do this. Well, here's what I thought the way I would kind of design the circuit. And you kind of demonstrate a little 2-3 minutes how you design the circuit or whatever it may be. Now, that's a way to, that's still the back door. It's not networking, but I got to tell you, it's going to increase your odds from 1x to at least 20x or 100x. The fact that you would even go out of your way to do it's pretty cool. So now we've got some, now I really like to open it up to most of this red thing for real questions. Then I've got some for you, but let's open it up and then I've got some more that we can talk about too. So what are some questions that stand out there, JJ?
Yeah, we've got a lot of people who are asking questions about transitioning from fields, so specific, not just within changing jobs within the same field, but actually changing careers completely. It sounds like this process would work for people who are changing jobs or looking for jobs within their existing field, but then also transitioning into a completely different field. Is that true?
Okay. Let's kind of leave it general. I'll answer a general question just so it's helpful for everybody. So the idea of transfer. Let me just answer it, and if I'm wrong, you can clarify it, JJ. But okay. If it's transferring from another industry, and I think that's possible. And it goes back to the point I made in the hidden market, there's a lot more flexibility. If you get, let's just assume this condition, the ideal condition, which is challenging but not impossible. The ideal condition is, let me just look at some names here so I can at least be semi-personal, even though I can only see your names. Let's assume that Adrian had worked with me in the past. Now, I hope Adrian, I don't know if that's a man's name or not, so I'm going to, it could be a woman's name, so rather than even, I'll just take Alexander. I know that's a guy. So let's assume that Alexander worked with, let's assume I am a project manager in construction, and Alexander worked with me 7 years ago on a project, as an intern. He went into a different industry. He's now changing. I know the guy was a great worker. So I'd say, wow, Alexander, tell me a little bit about what you've been doing. I think we might be able to work with you in this industry, but it's getting somebody else to speak about your capability. Now, when I'm looking at Alexander, he's a different industry. He doesn't have the 5 industry experience, but I know he's handled tough projects. I know he's reliable, consistent, will go 24/7, can handle and manage people in whatever the environment may be, has the raw technical skills to do it, has the engineering background that's easily transferable. I, the recommender, can kind of conclude that way. But I certainly can't do it if I don't know Alexander well enough to make the call. So that's what I would call the ideal way to make the transition. The less ideal way is to look at that job description. Now, the guy that I told you who did the thing with telecommunications, he didn't have any background in telecommunications. He had a background in consumer marketing, but he saw the posting that said part of the, must be able to do competitive analysis. So he just told me about it. I said, so why don't you just do spend 2 hours and do some kind of competitive analysis. It's not that tough. You put the customers down one list, you put the products down this list, you kind of read what all these people are doing, and you kind of take your basic competitive analysis, you just apply it to a different industry. And that got him an interview. Now, he was only had 2 or 3 years, so it was a little bit easier. He didn't have 20 years in industry. But nonetheless, he demonstrated that his skills from industry A were transferable to industry B, and he got the interview. I don't know what happened subsequent to that, but since he hasn't called me, my sense is he probably got a job. But he was a go-getter and proved that. So I think that's the other part, is you got to take your raw skills, how would I apply them? And don't, now, if you have a reference who can acknowledge and demonstrate it, which is very good, that's great. But if you don't, you have to prove it some other way. You'll probably have to prove it before the interview. That's why a lot of people get, oh, nobody's seeing me. I'm so qualified, nobody's seeing me. It's because, again, a recruiter is working a job. They don't have time to make the judgment call that you're a great person if you don't meet their specs. I mean, literally, they got the blinders on. Not only do they have the blinders on, when you're working, and these are good people. I know most of them. I don't know 5,000, but I've met hundreds of them personally, and they are very good people. They are equally as frustrated as you are. They feel constrained by working with a spec. But that's what they got, because they're working the public market. The best recruiters are working the hidden market. They have a lot more flexibility. So if Alexander came to me and I was highly recommended, and I was a recruiter, and I knew he was referred to me by a great source. And I'm not a recruiter, guys, anymore. I have not done recruiting at all. We don't do recruiting. We train recruiters and we train managers how to do this, and that's what we get paid for. And what I'm doing here, I don't get paid for. So I just do it because I think it's important. I do truly believe the public job market is so screwed up. So my mission in life is to get rid of these things, and actually, rather than try to fill a person with a specific job, is modify the job to fit the person. It doesn't exist yet. It does a little bit in the hidden market. So the idea is, before the interview, how do I prove to somebody I can do that work? And whether it's the interview, hey, I know you're looking for a facilities engineer in this industry, but when I was in facilities, I did this, this, and this. I started a new factory in this industry, in this industry. In fact, I remember placing a guy like that. It was definitely a guy who had no background. And I think it was, my job wasn't oil and gas. I can't remember what it was. I just think it was supply chain. And I said, you haven't done anything in this area. And then the guy told me, he said, what are you talking about? I set up a whole logistics program, and it was a pipeline through somewhere. And he said we were behind by 6 months, and here I pulled it together. And I told him, my God, you can do this job. He definitely was one, I don't know that he got it, but he was definitely one of the finalists. He convinced me because he did a project that was so, I mean, in terms of complexity and challenge and decision-making and depth of experience and scope was so close that I knew the guy could do it. He was definitely a finalist. And yet, if I looked on paper, he didn't make the mark. Now, he was referred to me because somebody said, you got to meet this guy. And I did it as a courtesy, and it worked out well. And at first, I told the guy he wasn't qualified, and then he, I didn't do it. I said, you got to convince me you can do it. And then he gave me this example of an accomplishment. So I think you got to do it before the interview. Hopefully that's helpful, guys. Let's get another question here. And that's why I don't want JJ to give it too specific, because I'm not going to answer it anyway. So.
Okay, we've got a two-part question, very closely related. So the first part of the question is, when does networking turn to stalking? And then along those lines, do you have any recommendations of methods of staying in touch with people that you're networking so that they're not perceived as bugging the people or stalking them?
Excellent. I've just done, but I don't know when they're going to be available, I just did a series 10 podcasts, 3 to 5 minutes for job seekers around the book. We have a publishing company that wants to take the book and add a series of videos around it. And it won't be available for, well, we're lucky because they just changed the leader there by September. But nonetheless, that was one of the questions that I answered. And the idea is you can't be a pest. That becomes useless. But you do have to nurture this network. So let me just say, how do you nurture the network without becoming a pest? And it is, you will become a pest if, for example, if AJ and I worked 7 years ago and he saw me in one meeting and he was a vice president, and I say, AJ, I'd like to talk to you, but I'm a totally unremarkable person, and then it becomes a pest. On the other hand, if Alan referred me to AJ and we had a good meeting and I had a meeting with AJ and I do want to connect with him, he doesn't have anything available now, I can't call him every week. But once every 3 weeks or a month or 5 weeks, I could say, hey, AJ, I just saw this article about some industry changes, and I thought you'd be interested in it. Remember, I was referred by Alan. I'd just like to stay in touch with you. That, to me, is appropriate and interesting, or if you hear about something. But you got to remember, in my mind, you have to cycle this. You have to have about 50 to 75, 100 people in your network who all kind of know you're looking, and to nurture that network, you can't really touch everybody. every week anyway. It's about once every 3 to 5 weeks, enough where they know who you are. And then all of a sudden what happens is AJ says, hey Lou, one of our managers mentioned that they were looking for somebody. This is what a coincidence this is. There might be a job here for you. Now, the truth, it wasn't any coincidence. You're talking to 100 people. Eventually, I think it was somebody this morning said even a blind squirrel gets a nut once in a while. Well, you're dealing with a lot of different people who are in the network, in the job arena. Eventually, somebody's going to hear about something. It isn't a coincidence. It is to that person. To you, I've been working my heart out for this, guys. But I got to tell you, it's a heck of a lot better than wasting your time responding to ads, which is pure lottery. Then the job is, there's very little. The job's not going to be changed much. It's that job or no job. And to me, in the public market, you're getting a job. In the hidden market and networking, you're getting a career. You can do both, but if you're going to go in the public market, be creative and go through the back door. Another question, JJ.
Yeah, we've got a lot of people on this call who are making the transition from the military life into civilian life, and they have some unique challenges. Do you have any suggestions on how to make that transition within this hidden market?
Yeah, pretty much. And actually, I really feel strongly about that. That is so important to do. And I think corporate America, and so I'm going to try to be politically correct. Why? I'm never politically correct, so why should I start today? I think they haven't really, it goes back to the traditional job description. I think they're useless. I hate job descriptions. I wonder if I have, let me just hold on here. I want to just see something here. So this might answer the question. Oh, where did I do that? I guess not. I'm going to take another deck here. I thought I had another slide. Oh, there it is. I did have it. I just have it hidden. So let me kind of do this, and then you'll see where I'm coming from. And it's almost how you make the transition, whether it's a different industry or not. I do not like job descriptions that list skills, duties, responsibilities. This is the public market. It's what they say. We train, we've trained, what, 3,000 to 5,000 recruiters in the last 10 years. We probably trained 5 times that many hiring managers in the same time. My company trains recruiters and hiring managers. That's what we do. But the one thing when we start the class is we do not use job descriptions because it will prevent you from hiring anybody good. It will prevent you from hiring diverse candidates. It will prevent you from hiring returning military vets. It will prevent you from hiring young people with high potential. So they're useless. And then I ask, what's the probability of someone having all those skills will be a top performer? And hiring managers say it's about 50-50. I said, then have you ever met someone who's a real top performer who doesn't have that exact background? They all raise their hand. I said, and why would someone who is a top performer who does have that background want to do the job? They can't come up with a reason other than maybe the company's great. I said, so why do you use them? So I then changed the description. I said, what does as a recruiter, I've been doing this since 1978, guys. I'm a pretty old guy here. And my background was pretty weird as a recruiter. I don't know if you guys read the bio, and you don't have to. I have an engineering background. I was actually a very good engineer. I have an MBA. I was actually very good in business. I actually was running a company for I was running the smallest Fortune 500 division of the smallest Fortune 500 company, but I still, at 30 years old, I just didn't like working 7 days a week, 12 hours. And I had a 4-year-old son who I'd never met, and I started using recruiters, and I said, geez, this is being a recruiter. I'm doing all the recruiting, and they're getting all the money for it. So I just, literally, my wife didn't force me, but I knew I wanted to stay around with my family. I had to do it. Still married 40 years later. So the point is, when I became that background, I never used the job description. I would just go into a factory with a lot of manufacturing. Let's see, what does the work require? Let's define the work up front. Performance-based job description and performance profile. It was always stuff the person needed to do. So I would then ask the hiring manager, let's define success up front. What does the job look like up front? And I said, would you at least see someone who can do this work who might have a little different mix of skills? And this is actually, if you're transferring from industries, and I actually say this to you when you get the interview. So this is the pre-interview, but this is a long story to get to the question about the military. By getting the manager to define the work up front, you're assessed on projects, just like this guy who set up this whole gas pipeline system. It was complicated enough, it was big enough, it was enough teams, there was enough pressure. The issues were all similar to what he had to do, but it was really a totally different project. That gets to my answer is, once you find out what the work is, you then have to give an example of work you've done that's most related to that. That's the interviewing piece, but it's also the transferability piece. So if a company doesn't have a real program for that, You've got to somehow figure out what the work is in the job. Now, if you're in the interview, you can just ask if you can. But your job is to take a look at your military experience at the project level. What did you do? You managed people, you led people, you dealt with tough time schedules, you had to think on your feet, you had to make tough decisions. You've got to kind of put that together in corporate speak. What is a project I've done that I think is really, and I have an interview question. You might actually want to do it. It's a blog post. It got probably my best blog post, and it's certainly the LinkedIn top 20. It's not the Bill Gates one and the Warren Buffett, but still, for being just a recruiter guy who writes a couple books, being in that league is pretty cool. But the question was the most important question of all time. And the question is, tell me about the best thing you've ever done in your life. And then it goes through a series of peeling the onion. When did you do it? Why did you do it? How did you do it? Why were you assigned? All this other stuff. Find that blog post and answer the question for yourself. That will be important because when you get the interview, you're going to have to ask the person something like this. From the job description, I couldn't quite tell what the job was. Can you tell me what the biggest challenge or biggest project is? And then you're going to give you that answer that's from the most significant accomplishment question. Now let's take it with that knowledge, because I had to kind of go here. The summary is it's what you do with what you have that counts. You've got to sell people, whether you're going from a different industry, any job, is what you're capable of doing, not what you have. For the military, unfortunately, it's even hard for me to look at. I can tell somebody, a good friend of mine was a commander on a destroyer. He got out, and he told me the stuff he had to do, logistics, cargo, logistics, all the stuff he was doing. I could see what he did, and I could personally relate to that, but it was still a hard sell to get into corporate America. But the idea is, okay, let me understand the job, let me understand what I've done. So now let's go, just to give you specific advice, is the best I can do in the short term, although I've got a bigger goal and bigger project for returning military vets, and I'm working with a group that's doing it too, is look at the job description. Try to read between the lines. And then take a look at some of the projects and work you've done that might get at that. And then put an email. Don't apply. That will not help. Put an email together to the vice president, director, or the VPHR. Make it high. Said, I am a returning military. I was a JMO. I know you're looking for people in logistics. Here's what I did in Iraq. Here I handled all of the, if you probably know, we've taken all that stuff out in 7 months, whatever it was. Here's what we had to do, the decisions, the time frames, logistics. I work with these kinds of systems to keep track of it, and here are the results of it. You're giving them a story that says, that's just what we do here. Now, I know that was a very long answer, and I'm probably rambling because I haven't thought it through, but that's, so I know it's not what I would say is webcast capable, where I could just quickly say that, but that's the idea, is you got to figure out how do you translate the real job by reading between the lines, coming up with a story, and don't apply, because if you apply, you'll be kicked out. But if you kind of go around the back door with that story, so hey, I can do this work, and maybe even do a little thing that, and not the competitive analysis, but say, hey, I'm looking at what you're doing. I understand your company is looking for this. I know you're trying to hire 3 people like that. Here's what I've done that I think might be capable. That's how I would handle it. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's how I would kind of target it.
Great. So what advice do you give for people who are still seeking jobs or have been victims of layoffs and short-term employment because of the recent recession? And those are looked at by recruiters as negative points. What suggestions do you have for job seekers to overcome those perceived negative things?
Yeah, that's a great question. But let me just say this. I'm a recruiter, guys. Just say I don't do it anymore. But for 25 years, I started every month at 0. I was an outside recruiter, had no money coming in. My only deal was making placements. And I got a lot of people who came to me like that. And the first question I said is, one way you have to neutralize the negative. And that's fine. But if you've been out of work for 6 months or a year or 2 years, my first question to you is, what did you do in the last 2 years? And if you didn't do anything to get better, I said, sorry guys, I can't help you. There's nothing I can do. Who am I? I'm just a recruiter. I get paid to put people in a job. Why were they going to pay me for you? On the other hand, if you said, I went to school, I did this, I did that, I learned the training here, if you actually did stuff to become better in that period of time, I'm going to say, you got the work ethic I'm looking for. It's not to say I could help you, but I would certainly say I would want to help you. and that's a difference. So you've got to demonstrate that it's, so I guess I'll use a quote from Jim Rohn, things will get better for you when you get better. And if you just kind of know, even when we had recruiters who lost a couple of deals, they would mope. Oh, my whole life is going to fall apart. I said, you got one day to mope and then get back at it. You just got to get in there. Yeah, I know it's hard and it's a pain in the neck. And 2 days later, they're starting to, their attitude is better. I know that's hard for me to say because I'm not sitting here. I'm kind of retired, although I still work. But the issue is I'm looking for people who have a work ethic, who are goal-oriented, who are willing to get better, willing to work hard at getting it, and they're not afraid to do networking. So part of it is people, oh, I can't network. The job market is so unfair. It's not unfair. It is. It's just that's the way it is, guys. Once you understand it's not the market's unfair. That's the you got 500 people. Let me tell you this. I think the market. Now I'm totally off track here. I think the internet was the worst thing that happened to the job market. I've been doing this for a lot of years. Before the job boards came along, if you wanted a job, you looked in the Sunday Classified. There weren't that many applied, so it was 30 or 40 people applied. You had a shot at getting an interview if you're halfway close. I had a hidden job market. If I had a bunch of search assignments, nobody knew about them. Even if they were publicized once on Sunday 3 weeks ago, you didn't remember it. And if I had a bunch of candidates looking, they were, I placed a lot of CPAs and a lot of engineers in the early days. Nobody even knew about these people. I knew about them. So it was a different market. Now all of a sudden you post a job, 500 people apply. So they put all systems around how do you handle 500 people. And everyone thought this was going to be the greatest thing in the world. It was actually the worst thing in the world. It created labor, it created mobility in the workforce, it created insensitivity. We've got systems that screen on this. So to me, what's actually happened is a bit of negative. And I believe that some of the stuff we've got right now is we got turnover, we got skills leaving. That's a totally different story, which I can only get aggravated when I think about it. But it's the world we live in, so you just got to deal with it. I'm sorry, JJ. Let me I have a couple more things I want to show and see if we get to not what I want to show because I'm past that. This is what I want to show. Okay, so let me just see if I've answered these questions first. So we did some. How do you get started? Well, you get started by contacting 3 people who know you and build your network that way. For military, talk with people who have left the military who can get you and ask them, hey, what do I do? How'd you get this job? What if I'm introverted? If you're introverted, I will say this is real critical. It is harder for you to go out and meet people. But it's not hard for you to go out and meet people whom you know. It might be hard for you to ask the question, but it's not hard for you to ask a specific question that says, how to review my resume. It's not hard to look on LinkedIn and get names. What would you recommend me to this person? But it's when you actually do get an interview, have a series of very important questions that you've thought about ahead of time. Not what's in it for you, but what some of the challenges facing the company, what would be a big project this person would work on. If you've thought about the answer to my most significant accomplishment question, you're in good shape. I always also suggest people who might be introverted, who might not make the greatest first impression, to always get phone screened first. And ask during the phone screen, hey, before I'm looking at a couple things, can you tell me some of the big challenges or big projects in the job? You want to be invited in for a personal interview based on some accomplishment you've had, not just because you're a friendly, warm person. Because if you can get invited in because of an accomplishment, people are already pre-biased towards the accomplishment, not towards how affable and friendly and outgoing you are and how you look. And I'll tell you, if you're introverted, a little bit quiet, don't make a great first impression, you will do not. If you work, and I placed a lot of people who didn't look great, guys. Let me tell you, if I knew, when I went to bat to somebody, I knew they were good, and my clients knew they were good. I was a very successful recruiter, and I had a very successful search firm. And I said, you guys see this person? Quietest person I ever met, but remarkable. Said, what do you mean? I said, this is what the person did. And then when they met the person, they said, yeah, I didn't know he was even quiet. It was too remarkable. I mean, it was almost like you got to get that out of the way because it's not, it's still important, but nonetheless, in the long run, it's not important. So it's an excuse. Don't make an excuse. Just deal with it. The back door we've already talked about. Should you apply? Never, unless you're a perfect fit. I just think it's a waste of time, but that's probably, I wouldn't take, I'd apply to some. but I'd also go to the back door as well, see what happens. And I think we've answered. Let's go through a couple more questions, JJ, and then we'll kind of tie it up here.
Okay, great. We've got a bunch of people who are submitting questions about getting feedback that they're overqualified for a position. So do you recommend removing things like advanced degrees from resumes?
Wait. Why don't you just, okay, again, let's not go down to just say, how do you handle being overqualified?
Okay.
So that, and it's a very fair question. And again, by forcing it, you sometimes miss the bigger one. I remember this, and this was probably, it was interesting. I was cleaning out my closet, and I remember when I started out as a recruiter in 1978, and in 1988, for some reason, I said, maybe I could start a training program, a seminar-based marketing to get real good candidates. And it didn't work, but nonetheless, I held a couple of webcasts, or actually, this was why I didn't have internet then. Some of you might not believe the internet didn't always exist, but didn't always exist. So I had a hired, hotel room, had about 50 or 60 people, and somebody asked me that question. So I was only in the recruiting business 10 years, and I said, who? And I asked the guy, who are you? What are you? Tell me a little about yourself. So he stood up. He was a PhD in chemistry, and I said, so you see you're overqualified. What was the job that you were looking for? And he said it was a chemist doing some kind of lab work and doing something or other. And I said, when did you last do that work? He said, I can do that work perfectly. I said, I know, but when was the last time you did that work? And he said, about 10 or 15 years ago. I said, you're overqualified. If you were motivated to do that work, you would have been doing it last week or last month. You would do it. Even if you're a lab director right now, you would take time away to say, I just love this stuff. So the idea of overqualified is if you don't, and I wrote this article, I wrote an article yesterday, or Sunday night. It was called, it was really got, a lot of people hated the article, so I totally rewrote it. Now it's called something tame. I tried to say 10 reasons not to hire competent people. That was the article. And not everybody hated it, but a lot of people hated it, so I just said rethinking the hiring process, and it's now tame and boring, but nobody hates it. People like it, but I hate it, so it doesn't matter. It's just so boring and bland nonetheless. But it goes to the point of, in my mind, if you're not highly motivated to do the work, I don't care if you're competent to do it. To me, it's competency times motivation equal results. So I look at both of those. So being competent but not motivated to do the work means you shouldn't get the job, because I know it's an economic need you're taking, and that might be hard to deal with. But to me, if I'm a recruiter trying to place somebody who I know is going to stick around for a year or two, and I have a year guarantee when I was a recruiter, so I actually was more diligent than my clients. But I didn't make any money if you left in a year. So I want to make sure you're motivated to do that work. So now I go to the answer. If you are hearing you're overqualified, the counter to that is prove that you enjoy doing that work. Okay, yeah, this guy was a lab director, and I remember this is like 1988, so we're talking 25 years ago. I just remember it like it was 23 years ago, which is probably the best humor we're going to get for today, right, JJ?
Yes.
It was actually very good, guys, but you probably don't care about that, but neither here nor there. So the point is, if you told me, and that guy said, what I do is I just love doing raw research. So 20% of the time, I wish it was more, but I can't. In fact, he then said, I came up with this new idea for this new film development process that would do this, this, and this. And boy, but truthfully, I can only do that, starting at 3 or 4. Sometimes I stay 7. Most of my late nights, most of my overtime is working on projects. I know what my day job is, managing the team, getting stuff done. But boy, I tell you, I just love that. Now, if you could say that, I'd say, well, maybe you're a good leader and a good manager, but you love techie stuff. I'd probably send you out there if there was some mix. So I think that's really the issue is if you can't prove you're motivated to do the work. Now, on the other hand, let's assume that you've gone through, he says, I know you believe that I'm overmotivated, and you think I'm overqualified. But in this job, I was overqualified, but I don't think anybody there in this company would tell you I didn't do everything to get this job done. Here was something I did that I had to actually get this part done. It was far below what I had done before, but I put the same energy and effort into that I did in the job that I'm perfectly qualified for and love to do. So if you can demonstrate that you go the extra mile for stuff where you are overqualified and have done it recently, even if you don't love it, but you're willing to do any kind of work that gets it done and you're a fully committed person, I'd say, hey, you got a shot at it. That's how I would handle that question. Might not be what you want to hear, but that's how I would deal with it.
Great. So what kind of tips do you have that are kind of breaking the ice tips to begin networking with people who you don't know?
Yeah, again, I'll go back to, well, you got to start with who you know. So I guess I would not start that way. I just don't think that's what you should do. I think you should start what I have here. I mean, I don't think you should do that way. I mean, you can do it. I mean, maybe it'll come here. The way I want to meet people I don't know, is through a connection. So I'm going to meet people I do know. And then I'm going to look on their LinkedIn connections and give me people I don't know. The likelihood of getting to someone you don't know through someone you know is 50 to 100%. To get to someone you don't know and trying to connect with a person is probably 20%. But you have to have some reason and some value to get to that person. So I go back to this guy in marketing. He called the vice president up of a company. He knew they were looking for a job. He went through the back door. He did something that demonstrated something unusual. But just to call up and say, I'd like to talk with you. I mean, I get so many calls from, and I'm sure maybe some of you guys did. You send me your resume. I haven't placed a person in 5 years. That's not totally true. I placed a controller and a VP finance and a director of engineering. That's 3 jobs. I don't do research. So why would you send me your resume? And I'm using me as the classic recruiter. If there's not something in it for the person or making yourself unusual, they're not going to do it. And it's not because they don't want to. It's just they're focused. I mean, recruiters are laser focused on filling 20 jobs. That's a lot of jobs, guys. They frustrated like heck. All they can do, you think they're box checkers? They know they're box. Oh, I hate this job. All I do is box check. They have a couple of jobs that they really like to do where they get out of the box of working with managers who are looking for career people. So the idea is, my perception, if I was trying to meet someone, so example, I'm trying to meet a couple of people or get new clients at marketing. I send them a copy of my book. Hey, I'd like to chat with you about this, particularly chapter 17 on this issue. I noticed it, and does it always work? No, but it works some of the time. So I send them an article. Hey, I saw this article that Google is now not using GPAs to hire anybody. We had the same conversation 4 years ago. I'd like to chat with you about it. So doing something different is probably the key. Maybe I just leave it at that. Doing something different that separates you, that brands you as unusual, maybe the little work project, I think that's the case. Differentiate yourself to make the connection. And you have to do that some of the time, usually going through the back door. Let's take one more, JJ, and then we'll summarize.
Yeah, we have a lot of people on this call who are either current college enrollees or attendees or recently graduated. Do you have any suggestions, recommendations for those people entering the workforce?
Well, yes. I remember, and I wrote an article about this, I think, 3 or 4 months ago. I got an email about beginning of the year from a marketing professor at Loyola in Southern California. I remembered I had talked to that guy 10 years prior to that, but I was obviously on his mailing list as a recruiter. And he said, this candidate, I'd like to introduce you to so-and-so, my best marketing student this year. He went through and told me why. I looked at the candidate's resume, underwhelming, grades weren't great, nothing special about the resume, other than this guy that I had met 10 years ago said, this is my best marketing student this year. I called the guy up and talked to him. He was a very good young man. I didn't have a spot for him, but I wanted to make the connection. And he wasn't very good. His resume wasn't, and I told him, your resume sucks compared to who you are, but that's a different issue. For a marketing person, you didn't do a very good job marketing. I don't know that I aggravated him or not, but he was really a very good person. Now, the point is, who do you know who could recommend you to somebody? You got professors. I remember I got to school. I know my advisor, and I know a couple of my fraternity, the guy he would have recommended me if I needed it. I mean, at the time, the career placement office was pretty cool, but I mean, I would have just used people who know me. I had a part-time job for 3 years. I know the president of that company was a little warehousing company. I know that guy would have recommended me. He offered me a job after I graduated as an engineer. This is 40 years ago when I graduated as an engineer. He offered me a job. I know if I obviously, then he said, hey, I'm not interested in working for you, but can you get me over here? So I look at LinkedIn as a network, and you can tap into it. You can see the names of people connected to your network. So I guess my advice to networking is use a network like LinkedIn to network. It already gives you all the names of the people there. Start with people you know, and then be unusual with people you don't know. You do those kinds of things. Surprisingly, it's hard work. I know it's a pain in the neck. You might get a job. So let me summarize.
Well, Adler, before you summarize, can you share your feelings on other social networking like Facebook and Twitter? Are those effective networking tools as well?
Oh, I think, yes. I think, well, they're different. But I certainly, so I'm not an expert on that. But I do know that this woman, I think her name is Cheryl Moore, because I saw her. She went to one of our, she's a recruiter. She Twittered me about the course that she took. I'm now following her. I see all the stuff she does. So I'm connecting with her. I can see she's really a with it kind of person. So I think you can kind of search on Twitter and find people who might be connected who are very, and she is very social media savvy, looking for medical device engineers. So, you know, I probably could connect her that way. Facebook, I have a problem, and I can't answer on Facebook. I still don't even know why Facebook exists. Somehow, I don't need, I mean, to tell last night I was helping my wife set up her booth for a big art show this whole summer down in Laguna Beach, California. So I did that on Facebook and had my relatives say, hey, great, we'll come down to see you, and JJ's coming down to see her. I can't get that yet, even I'm looking at the time graph, how I can use that for recruiters. So I just don't need it. I mean, I just use LinkedIn. So on Twitter, I certainly can see how using it for different reasons, but I'm not an expert on that. I am an expert on using LinkedIn to find candidates, and I find enough candidates on LinkedIn. I don't need to, it works for me. I'm networking. I don't post ads. Now, maybe I do, but it's only but 90% of the time I'll call people up on the phone and network with them. So I don't know if that helped, but again, a lot of what we talked about is in the book. No obligation to buy it, budurl.com. You might just want to look at the table of contents. That'll tell you. I mean, it's not a pretty inexpensive book for what you get. But the real point that I want to make is the hidden market, a lot more flexibility in the hidden market, and networking gets you in the hidden market. Networking is at least 20, if not 100 times better than responding to a job. Being endorsed changes the whole nature of the process. It's about careers, not jobs. And if you constantly